Hello, everyone. This is Maisha with As Long as You're Breathing, and I'm bringing you this is a treat for all of us. An Every Life is a Story event where we're going to find out about Mr. J. Remer here, who is Canada's etiquette guy. Yesterday, I was calling him Canada's etiquette man, which is, that's the way I was saying it, but he's Canada's etiquette guy. That's the way they prose it there. And well, he's Elizabeth Kipp's brother. So, absolutely, we're going to promote him here as much as he wants to be promoted here. But he stands certainly alone and shines in his own right. And I have read his manuscript, which we are here to talk about. But there's no way to separate the man from the manuscript because when you read it, you will find out that it is absolutely his reflections on what he has learned throughout life and his taking what we should innately know and bringing it to the forefront and saying, listen, people, if we do this, life is going to be so much better. And it's a wonderful manuscript. I've enjoyed it so much. I've enjoyed chatting with him already. And I can't wait for you all to get to know him better. And I'm going to enjoy getting to know more about him too and more about the manuscript. So without further ado, you all do know to please enable StreamYard so you can post here in the chat and we know you're there. And if you're watching with us, the video after the fact, please go ahead and post in the comments and we will answer you as well. All that out of the way without any further ado, and Every Life is a Story event, Mr. J. Remer. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you, Maisha, and thank you very much for having me on the show. It's great fun to meet you and to find out what that this show actually even exists because you're so wonderful to promote so many people who are trying to be current thinkers.
Yes, thank you so much. I enjoy so much what I do, so I just that alone is gratitude enough. But thank you for mentioning it. I feel honored that you brought it up. So thank you so much. I'm honored that you're here, though. Canada's etiquette guy. How in the world did you become that?
Well, I guess the shortest answer is I moved to Canada, but
Where would you like to
the
start, Jay? This is your story, so however you'd like to
So I'll
start.
tell you, I'll give you we'll go for beginner's mind on this one. And
Okay.
so I was raised in the U.S. I was raised in Wilmington, Delaware, and I went to school there. Then I went away to school in Connecticut, and then on to college in Colorado. So I went to Colorado College, where I received a liberal arts education, specializing in art history, and but before I kind of uh, got to college, I was already interested in entertaining and hosting parties and that sort of thing, which is a bit odd for a 14, year old kid, but that is nonetheless that's is what you get. And so I learned from my parents how to throw parties and how to do things the way they did them, which uh, is not far off of the kind of the formal way that people live their lives, with the idea that etiquette is behind everything that we do, and the thrust behind etiquette, of course, is having respect for other people and to be kind and to use your common sense, to trust your intuition, and to follow the golden rule. Those are all things that really are the pillars that the sort of get things moving in the right direction, and they cross all demographics. So it doesn't matter where you live or what your background is, the basic principles of respecting one another don't change. I work with an orphanage in Uganda right now, and a family that runs the orphanage and its extended family, and they have many, many challenges that are quite different than the challenges that we have here, but the principles that guide them are the same. So we can communicate on a certain level very, very effectively. And it's quite interesting to see how such different cultures can get together totally effectively and help one another. So, um, uh, I went to college. I graduated from college. I got a teacher's certificate, and I immediately went to work in New York City for Sotheby's,
Oh,
and
wow.
I was hired as a proofreader. So here you have a fancy um, college degree, but you get hired as a proofreader, which was fine for me. I didn't know any better, and I knew I could read. So there you go.
And you were going to go prove it.
You go prove it. So that lasted about 2 weeks, and they realized that I had other talents. And
Right.
so I stayed with them for about 4 years, and I really learned the art business inside out and backwards. And that was really my career, was um, doing appraisals for fine arts and antiques, and advising people on how to form collections, how to deal in the art world. And I then decided at a point in time I moved to Canada with my partner Greg, who designed my book cover, and um, um, I kind of eased out of the art business and into the hospitality business rather full tilt, and restored a fabulous the house I'm sitting in right this minute. Um, 18th century house in St. Andrews, New Brunswick, Canada, which
Wow.
is one of the most special places on the planet. It's a beautiful, beautiful town, and we have been pretty resilient to COVID down here. Touch wood so far.
Right.
Um, and so Greg and I ran the Windsor House for a number of years, and then we separated. We I changed the direction of the Windsor House, and it is now a residence where I have monthly um, residents who live here, and it's all one big happy family. When I decided to get out of the hospitality business, though, a friend of mine actually said to me, said, "Well, if you're going to do this etiquette guy stuff," and because have, it's fascinating, and you'll be able to relate to this, Mesha. Um, you'll get in with a group of people, and it'll be, you'll find like this particular thing has to do with um, people sitting at a table.
Hmm.
Where do people sit at a table? And when I came
Right.
to Canada, it was not a thing that people sat where you told them to sit. They sat wherever they wanted. And that's just not the way I do things. So I find it much more interesting if you mix people up a bit. And so I developed this reputation 25 years ago for being able to arrange table seatings. I still, to this day, am asked to arrange people at the table. So it's a unique skill,
Yeah. Well,
apparently.
you can put people next to people that and put unusual combinations together, and imagine the conversations that get sparked that would not happen otherwise, and the interactions that happen. And so, yeah, that would be that's something I would love to do.
Well, it's important to be able to do it. It does help, and it does make the parties fun. But in
Yeah.
the meantime, I decided to get a more formal training so that I could teach etiquette myself.
Hmm.
And because so I went to the Protocol School of Washington, which is a fantastic school, and it was a great opportunity for me to get a framework in which to build, a presentation. And so that was fantastic. And then I came back to Canada and went to the local newspaper and asked the publisher, who was a friend of mine, if I could write an etiquette column. And he said, "Sure." So and to this day, I'm still doing that. I'm
Right.
now writing. This week, I'm writing column number 610. So I've
Wow.
been at this for a while, and I simultaneously called the television station and said, "How about doing an etiquette show?" And they said, "What a great idea." Well, now I'm chairman of the television station, so it was a success, and I've done probably 100 episodes of that and other shows. So it's been kind of a burgeoning career at my age, and I decided after a while of teaching etiquette. You know, how many times can you write about how to set a table, or how to send an invitation, or how to send a thank you note, or how to do whatever you need to know how to do? I'd covered it all. I'd written 6 columns on Mother's Day and so forth. So I thought, I need to expand this. And so I am someone who has a therapist who I see on a regular basis.
Sure.
And I say to her, I said, I would rather skip breakfast than you. So that's how important
Sure.
she is to me. And so as I was going through this, and which is a very, it's a process that takes a lot of commitment. And I discovered a lot of things about myself that I felt would help other people if they could discover this about themselves. And it led me into the world of civility, because there is so much of a lack of civility. And
Yes.
um, when I started in earnest doing this, would have been about 7 or 8 years ago. And at the same time, a gentleman by the name of Andrew Foss hired me to do editing and social media work for him. So, and he focuses on civility and especially emotional intelligence in the workplace. And he's an
Wow.
expert on bullying. So I learned a whole new facet of about life, and realized that I was raised in a family that was filled with bullies. So I actually learned how to. I learned personally how to manipulate situations so that I could survive back then. But now, as an adult, I've learned how to do it in a slightly more effective way. So I started writing about civility and picking away at all of the different pieces, and arrived basically at the template that turned into the book that you have, and or you will have. Um,
Well, I have the manuscript.
manuscript. That's right. So I have used the principles, which are um, awareness, compassion, humility, gratitude, encouragement, and responsibility. I've used those as a framework to for everyone to use to work on challenges in their lives. And because we have so many challenges in our lives now, politically in the U.S. and around the world, it things are in a bit of a shambles. And so this is and then you just overlay the COVID pandemic, and it turns things from bad to worse. And the only way I think that we can come to grips with this um, is to work on ourselves first, because this is not a dress rehearsal. We have one life to live, and we can't go back and correct things that we maybe wish we could. We certainly can't change our situations, but we can certainly control and have a responsibility for how we react to situations. And we do need to take responsibility for our actions and our words. And so I found that writing all of this down in the form of newspaper columns over the last decade or so has really been helpful. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, both from readers as well as from clients, business clients who have had, one problem or another. And I run them through the 6 pillars, which has really only discusses business peripherally, but the principles that they use to look at their own lives changes their businesses entirely once they incorporate them. So that's
Absolutely.
that's sort of the 25 words or less version of how I got to where I am today.
Well, it's an amazing journey for sure, and that of course that's as you said the Reader's Digest version, and it's an amazing journey, and there's so many things in there. You have to come back so we can talk about some of them because it's all fascinating. But I loved the 6 pillars that you picked. Um, they are amazing, and I loved how you said. Living a balanced life in a chaotic world through the powers of awareness, compassion, humility, gratitude, encouragement, and responsibility. Um, I loved how you called them powers because Actually, the way I saw it is they're capabilities we have or abilities, actions we can choose to walk in, how we can choose to show up in the world. And you said what you said at toward the end was because of the chaos in the world, um, it all we could do is work on ourselves. Well, that is the key to everything is once we all choose how we are going to show up in the world. Hello, glad to have you. Please put down in the chat who you are, and if you have any questions, I know Jay would love to answer them, so glad to have you. Once we all choose how we are going to show up in the world, that creates the ripple effect that is then truly the power, because everything is energy. And so um, and that is true power. And so I loved how you worded that it is it is through the powers of, and it is a full circle. It is the capability of each of us to do this, to exert this power in the world, and not in a controlling way, but by controlling ourselves, by growing ourselves, by, and so these are all capabilities, innate capabilities we have that once we realize that we have no expectation of anyone but ourselves, and we decide how we are going to show up in the world, and we have that ripple effect out. Once we're all doing that, then the world changes.
Mm.
And so your book, The Six Pillars of Civility, are, they're asking each of us to go within, do that, and then we will change the world. And so I loved it. I opened it up, I read that first part, and I said, well, son of a gun, we agree from the get-go on exactly. You said it entirely differently than I say it, but we are saying the exact same thing, and I absolutely loved it. So hello, glad to have you. Please put your name in the chat and let us know who you are, and if you have any questions for Jay, I know he would love to answer them. So yes, Jay.
One of the things I think, Mesha, I was asked in another interview is how do you go about making the change? Because it's very easy for people to say, well, you can just, all you have to do is make up your mind. Well, that is not an easy thing to do. And I
Absolutely.
think this is the reason that working on ourselves is the place to begin.
Yes.
Because, um, and it's a place to begin because we need first to give ourselves permission
Permission.
to work on
Yes.
ourselves because we find that we don't have time. We've got responsibilities for other people. And we also need distractions from the suffering that we're experiencing. Because as we go through life and we have these challenges, I mean, we are wired to move away from suffering. And the amount of suffering on the planet right now is enormous. And so it's not an easy step to take to just get over it or just
Oh,
let it
absolutely.
go. Those are the most unhelpful suggestions that people could possibly make because they're dismissive. They're not respectful of the suffering that the person is actually going through. So
Absolutely.
what I've tried to do with this book is to make it so people can have a place really to begin. And you need to begin by sitting still. And that alone is a big step for people. If you can't sit still, you're you're not going anywhere with this. And you're going to remain miserable. So once you get to the point where you can give yourself permission to get, like, say, take a couple of minutes a day on yourself, it can grow and you can wind up spending more and more time. And the more time you spend, the better you're realizing your life is becoming, and no one else is suffering anymore because you're taking time to yourself. So it works out quite well. So one of the things that I thought might be helpful today, Mesha, is to
Sure.
just quickly go through each of the pillars, and,
Absolutely.
and,
Absolutely.
and because they're words that are familiar to all of us, but
Yes.
sometimes we don't understand the full meaning, and so if we have time to do that, I'll
You go
start,
right ahead.
and you shut me off when you need to. But and I'll do it as quickly as I can. So the first pillar is awareness, and awareness in the context of this work is how we affect other people and how they affect us.
Yes.
And if you just take a moment to um, take that one question and meditate on it, you will be surprised at the answers that are revealed. So, because we don't take the time to think about these things often, we don't actually realize how we affect other people and how they affect us. And it's important to understand that. Once you have that, then you can move on to the next pillar, and they're not really in any order, but um, I'll take them in the order that they're in the book. Compassion is the next one, and compassion is a word that is flying around everywhere these days,
Yes.
and it's somewhat misunderstood in that compassion is something that is attached to suffering, and it is attached to relieving suffering without judgment. And so to identify where someone is suffering and to give them space to feel their emotions without judging them for whatever they could be suffering from. There's all kinds of people that require compassion in this world. In fact, all of us at one point or another. And it's very easy to give compassion to someone who's got a stubbed toe or has an illness or has lost a loved one, or these kinds of things that happen every day. But it's not so easy to have compassion for people who have done you wrong, and
Yeah.
those are the people that need it the most. And those are the people that we need to learn to give compassion to the most. Because um, we also we need to realize that people are doing the best they can. It may
Yeah.
not be very good in our eyes, but it is the best that they can do. And that alone is oftentimes a good reason to have compassion for someone. And selective compassion is not okay. Either you're a compassionate person or you're not a compassionate person. But to pick and choose is not does not make you a compassionate person. But the flip side of compassion is the self-compassion piece.
Yes.
And self-compassion is something we really don't have time for. If you don't think we have time for awareness, we really don't have time for self-compassion. We are constantly beating ourselves up for being not good enough at this or too late or whatever we've done that we don't think is up to snuff. Beat ourselves up for, because
Yes.
we're constantly feeling like somebody is judging us. And really,
Yes.
the most the biggest judge is ourselves.
Yes.
Everybody else has got stuff to do out there. They're all busy doing their judging themselves. They're not judging us. So
Right.
I think taking the time to give ourselves a break is really important. And I think we really need to learn to do that. I'm learning right now about the importance of rest. And people don't rest enough. They've just got too much to do and they need to rest, and they feel guilty if they rest. It's like, no, I don't have time to rest. Well, you don't have time not to rest. And I always go back to the
Yes.
um, to the to the to the instructions that flight attendants give you. You put the mask on yourself first before you put it on your kid.
Right.
This is the way life needs to be. We need to put the mask on ourselves in all of our arenas, because if we don't have ourselves balanced and grounded, we're not going to be able to help anyone else. We're not even going to be able to recognize another person's emotions if we don't have our own under control.
And that is the purpose of being here to begin with, is we are all interdependent and in relationship to some degree or another. And so if we can't do that, um, absolutely, you're absolutely right. And one of the quotes that you used was that we're not here to be happy, we're here to be of service, and to be useful and honorable and compassionate, and to have lived and to have made some difference, that you have lived and lived well. So you are hitting exactly. So many people get self-care and all of that so backwards. They think it's about self. Well, it is about self, but it's about self. So then we can then show up in the world as our best self.
Mm.
And so, yes,
Well,
yes,
I think that's true, and I think the thing is that we tend to judge ourselves as being selfish, and
right.
And selfishness has a stigma of being a bad thing, and it
Right.
isn't always a bad thing.
Right.
Um, but I think that self-care is really important,
Yes.
and we're not generally in North America, we're not taught that.
Right.
It's just not the way we're raised.
Right.
So if you don't, it's a topic that really needs to be looked into. There's a tremendous amount of work now being done in the world of psychology around compassion, and there's a whole compassionate school of psychology which started really in England and is now it's and self compassion is has been picked up by some doctors in Austin, Texas, and there's a tremendous amount of work being done around this, and it's hugely significant and hugely important. So the compassion piece is a big pillar. Next one is humility, and humility is really there's no big shots,
Yeah.
and we're not raised in a world of no big shots. We've always, even as children, you look up to your parents, you look up to your doctors, firemen, policemen, all of that kind of thing, which of course is changing these days, but um, it is nonetheless something that is not healthy at the moment. We need to remember that we're all equal for the most part. And so it's fine to look up to people. It's fine to have mentors, but it's not okay to give them all of your power so that whatever they say or do is what you're going to say or do. That's not a healthy exchange. So
Right.
the flip side of humility is remembering that you are equal in so many ways and
Right.
considering yourself that way. That is an adjustment that takes time, and if you don't take the time to go to think about that,
Right.
it's not going to happen. These revelations are not going to happen to you. So I think humility is something that is really important. I know that I've gone through this where I've had mentors who rule the world. Like, is whatever that person says is
Yeah.
going to be what I'm going to do. And and that's fine for a moment because sometimes we need a little bit of cuddling. But it is not okay to turn it into a lifestyle because then you give up all your power and you're not of any use to yourself, and you're certainly not of any use to your family or your community.
Right.
So that's the humility piece.
Right.
And then gratitude is the next one. And a lot of people, oh, well, gratitude is another one of these words that's flipped around all over the place. You've got to be
Isn't it
grateful for
though?
this,
Yes. Yes. We hear it all the time.
gratitude journals and gratitude this and gratitude that. And it's all really important
Yes.
because, and I find when I'm doing counseling, a lot of people will come to me and they say, I'm bored. Well, boredom is cured by being grateful
Yes.
to things that we
Yes. Yes.
dismiss as normal. Things
Yes.
that are normal, we can still be grateful for. And
Yes.
and it's helpful to be grateful for all of those things. Somebody went to a lot of trouble to build this house that I'm sitting in right now. You have to be grateful for these kinds of things. You
I
can't just
don't I don't know that there's anything that is just normal. I don't know that there's anything that's just normal. I'm one of those people that I'm truly like, see a sunrise, every sunrise is different. Every second of every sun, I can take like, I'm one of those that the camera can go off like bam, 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 and I can look at every shot and I see something different in it. And so when people say, oh, that's just normal everyday stuff, I'm like, I don't know what that is. And I'm grateful that I'm that kind of person because it keeps me from getting bored. So I'm so grateful for that. So what you're saying is so true about um gratitude is what keeps us from getting bored. When we can see the world and see that nothing is normal. There is no such thing as normal. There's no such thing as um the mundane. It's how we open our eyes and look at it. It's how we allow all of our senses to experience things. And so I love gratitude is so much more than just, well, I'm thankful for that. Experience it. Gratitude is experiencing life. That's how I see gratitude.
Mhm.
Gratitude is experiencing life. When you experience everything around you, that's living gratitude.
Well, I think it's important, and I think that what you say about things aren't normal, um, we don't need to treat things as though they're
Right,
normal, but we
right.
do, in order to survive, we need to normalize things. Otherwise, our emotions would go haywire.
Yes,
So, and unfortunately, we normalize things that are not healthy.
yes,
And,
yes,
and as you had mentioned the importance of interconnectedness before, and
right.
one of the things that we're experiencing right now is a loneliness epidemic.
Oh,
People
yes,
are lonely, and they're lonely for all kinds of reasons. But I think that one of the things that's really important, which maybe we'll get into after I finish up the pillars, is um, is how important it is to really um, e- know, experience what this loneliness business is all about, and to understand the emotions that go along with people who are lonely and the people who are not lonely, and why is there this problem of making these connections sometimes. People can be isolated for any number of reasons, and with the pandemic going on, they just are exacerbated. And so even schools, like up here in where I am right now, schools have been closed, and so it's all homeschooling. Well, that just throws a wrench into everyone's lives,
right,
and it's n- and it's but and so what we don't want to do is we don't want to wind up normalizing that kind of thing,
right.
because all you're doing is normalizing stress and suffering, and that is not okay. So figuring out, well, what do we do, is that's what I write about, is what do we do.
What do we do?
So we pop on to the next pillar after gratitude. That is encouragement.
Yes,
So encouragement is something that we need, especially if you want to look at this in the loneliness epidemic. um, we need to be encouraged in whatever our endeavors may be. Now, as children, some of us are lucky. We have parents who like us and they encourage us, and they put our little drawings up on the refrigerator and all that kind of good stuff. They tell us we've done a good job and all of that kind of thing. We don't all grow up that way. I didn't grow up in a household like that. And so for people like me, um, we don't quite understand accepting um, people who say you've done a good job. Like that's a foreign concept. It's like, well, that's what we're supposed to do. That's where normalizing something is unhealthy. It's
right.
like, well, you're expected to do a good job. If you don't do a good job, out comes the stick. But there's no carrots in that world, and that's a problem. So I think we need a world filled with more carrots at the moment. Ultimately, we should live in a no carrot, no stick world where everything's just fine. But that's not the way we're designed as human beings. So it's not likely to happen anytime soon. But we could introduce a few more carrots. And I think that being nice to people and encouraging them is important. And we don't need to live in such a competitive world. I was reading something that Kurt Vonnegut had said years ago, and it's a very famous concept of his, and it boils down to, we don't necessarily do things just to do them well. We don't have to be good. We don't have to be the best. Like when you go and play tennis, or you go play golf, or you go to speak in front of or go drive a car or cook a meal. You don't have to do it better than anybody else. You just have to do it, and you do it to the best of your ability, and be grateful for it, and be
Yes,
happy, and
yes,
encourage others to do the same.
yes,
So I think encouragement's really important,
yes,
and there's not enough of it. And I think it is especially important to encourage children. We are not aware of the damage that we inflict on our children by not encouraging them. And I think it's an important concept that it's being introduced into the general world now, but it's a really important one. And when I look back and think, I wonder how different my life would have been if I had been encouraged instead of, no, well, why do you want to do that? It was just too much of that. And so even to this day, when people say, "Oh, that's really great," I don't really know what to do with that statement. It's like
Yeah,
I'm looking around like so.
I
Anyway,
understand.
that's the encouragement pillar, and I think it's one that these pillars are kind of set up so that on any given day you're going to be wanting to look at one pillar more than another.
Sure.
So they're all handy to have. Now the final one in this book is responsibility. And responsibility is an important one simply because we do need to take responsibility for our actions and for our words, all
Yeah,
of them. And we also need to understand the flip side of responsibility, and that is what are we not responsible for? So, like,
absolutely.
I'm not res
Absolutely.
I'm not responsible for your reaction to what I have to say. You're responsible for that. I'm not responsible for, people that live here, how they cook their food. They're responsible for that. I butt in every once in a while because I think, the smoke alarm might go off, but it's not really my place to butt in. And, I find that people butt in all the time. I do it myself, like if you're gonna let's just say take something simple like drive to the store. Well, there may be more than one route to take. But if you take that route, I'm going to say, well, no, if you took that route, it would be better if you went this way. Really, people need to give this up and they need to start paying more attention to what they say and do themselves. Because sometimes we'll say and do things that we're not particularly proud of. The first thing that we do is to blame somebody else or a situation outside of ourselves for why we did that action. And you can see it going on in the world of politics today. I mean, look at the it doesn't even matter what country you go to. Every single one, it's like a blame game. It's like they're not working together to solve a common problem. They're working as enemies. Um, and
Yes.
that's where this divisiveness and all of this comes from. And they're not taking responsibility. And I write quite a lot about the importance of realizing that in most situations, there's a shared responsibility if there's an issue.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that what I have found is that, well, okay, I'm willing to take a little bit of responsibility. Well, if you're willing to only take a little bit of responsibility, you only have a little bit of power. But if you have to
Oh, I
change the
love that.
situation,
I
if you
love
are
that.
willing to take full responsibility for your suffering, you have full power to make the change
I
because
love
you're
that.
the one that's got the problem. It's not them. You're the one doing the suffering. It's up to you to figure this out. And that's where being able to find a space to deal with and consider your emotions and to allow yourself to feel them and to sort it all out. Um, that's where these great revelations come. And Elizabeth Gilbert wrote in her most brilliant book called Big Magic. In there, she writes, and I've written about it, taken it right from her and put it in my book about small spaces.
Yes, I have that down to talk about. Yes, go ahead.
And it's in the small spaces that the magic lives.
Yeah.
And you need to look between the notes. You need to look between the breaths. You need to look at those little tiny spaces because that is where you're going to, first of all, find peace. And second of all, you're going to find amazing wisdom. So um, I think that it by finding those pieces of wisdom, it's easier to take full responsibility for how you feel about things and how you act upon those feelings.
Right. Yes. I had down there, you'd put the good stuff lives in the small spaces. And I loved that. I'm like, absolutely, that's where it lives. And that goes back kind of to the gratitude part too, is so that relates back as well. So, all right. So we've covered the six pillars. How would you like to go from there?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I think is important is to is to recognize the interdependency that the six pillars have on one another.
They do.
So they so that's one of the reasons why if you read the book, you'll think, well, he's not really talking about responsibility here. He's talking about something else. Well, that something else happens to
They're
be
interconnected.
related to
Yeah.
responsibility. And the more time I spend with these pillars, the more interrelated they are.
Yes.
And uh, I did a series of television shows recently with my friend Andrew Foss, which are readily available on YouTube, and it's called "Following the Golden Rule" with Andrew Foss. And we take each; it's a sort of an alphabetical characteristic series where we do A, B, C, D, and each episode has a different letter. And we talk about personality characteristics that are important, especially as they relate to business.
Hmm.
And um, the interrelatedness of all of those characteristics is extremely important. So, as we begin to understand how interrelated everything is and how interrelated we are with other people, we realize that we are in this together.
Yes.
And the more that we do that, the more people who are of a like mind come into our orbit. And
Yes.
so we can find our tribe more easily. And by supporting one another, we can then build a firm foundation on which we can then help and recognize the suffering of others within our family and then within our community. And what I have found is that if you can take a small challenge in you know in an area that's a relatively easy one to fix, like I don't feel like doing this today. Well, let's just look at that and see what is it that you don't why don't you feel like doing it. Well, it could be some really simple reason, like, well, when I was a kid, every time I did that, somebody would hit me. Well, it's not going to happen today. No, there's nobody going to hit you.
Right.
So when you come to these realizations, you can think, oh, that's not doing me any good anymore. I need to let this one go. And the only
Right.
way that you can do that is to sit with these emotions and let them do their thing. It's a quiet, slow process that basically rewires the brain. And if you can do it with a skilled professional, all the better.
I love that. And I also noticed that, oddly enough, since your sister talks so much about it all begins and ends with the breath, I noticed that you talk about maybe you were a little slow with it, maybe you were a little stubborn with it, but you also talk about the importance of breathing as well. So you mentioned that in the book. So because it brings us to calmness and peace. So maybe we can talk about that as well.
Well, I think yes. One of the things that people need to realize, and this is not something that you necessarily are. This is not information you're born with. But once you learn things, you can't really unlearn them. So this is one you're not going to be able to unlearn, and that is that when we're in a state of turmoil, like when we are suffering, depending to what degree we're suffering, we do not have the ability to think rationally. It's that simple.
Hmm.
It's not possible for the brain to function that way. The brain is a very complicated, not particularly well designed unit that is designed specifically to keep us alive. It's not designed to keep us happy. It's not designed to keep other people happy. It's designed to keep us alive, and that's it. Um, our the front of our brain where we do all the cognitive thinking and rationalizing and all of that,
Rationalizing.
that's one thing. But if the back of the brain says I'm living with threat, what's going on in the front is run for the hills. So um, it's very important one of the things is if you can stop and breathe and think about the inhale and the exhale and take a moment in between the inhale and the exhale to do neither, just to be, you calm down almost instantly. It's a very instant kind of a thing.
Mhm.
And then the brain can think rationally. So I think it's really important. That's why they, like my grandmother said, don't make important decisions when you're in a heightened state of
Right,
excitement.
right,
Give it 24 hours or give it an hour, give it 10 minutes or whatever it might be, but
right.
give it time. And I think that is, I think that it's really important to have that awareness because, and breathing is something that we do. Everybody, as Liz will tell you, comes into this world on an inhale and out on an exhale.
Yes.
And I have a stubbornness about me that's mixed in with my how I was raised that keeps me from doing things that are good for me sometimes.
We all kind of have a little of that.
We do, but if you can pull it together every once in a while, um, it every little bit helps.
Yeah,
This is one of those exercises that if you do it for a minute a day, that's to the plus.
yeah,
And and twice, 2 minutes a day is two times to the plus.
yeah.
So any time that we can devote to ourselves is really going to have huge benefits. And after all, this is the thing that people don't get their heads around enough, is that this is not a dress rehearsal. You only get to do this once, so you might just as well do it right. And I think that as we go through life and we begin to regain more balance and we grow up and we understand things differently and we realize that our parents were doing the best they could and so forth and so on, we get to a point where we can be calm and we can realize that actually this is the best way, and we can do it without having regrets. And I think not carrying regrets is really important because
Yes.
we all screw up. We all make
Yes.
mistakes every day. Every
Yes.
day we make mistakes. That's part of the deal. So
Yes.
to think that for some reason you don't make mistakes, or if you make a mistake, you're a bad person, is ridiculous. But it's ridiculous only because intellectually we think it's ridiculous, but it's actually a thing that is designed to keep us alive. The brain says, wait a minute, you're not doing this right. This could be danger.
Hmm.
We need to really come to grips with that inside of ourselves. And the only way that we can do that is to take the time to do the work. So, it doesn't matter who you follow. There are a lot of people out there who have an awful lot of good things to say. I would steer away from the ones that tell you how to get rich quick and how to invest in things and you're going to make money. Those are not the people that I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who are concerned about and focused on your emotions and how you learn to identify your emotions. I can remember, Mesha, the first time that I went, not the first time, I was into this group class that I would take once a week. It was a
Uh-huh.
spin-off from the old Silva mind control days.
Oh, yes, I remember Silva.
Remember
Yes.
Jose Silva? And so that's how I got into this whole thing in the beginning. Well, I became part of a study group, and I remember the leader said to me one night, she said, "How does that make you feel about something?" And I looked at her in complete bewilderment, and I said, "I don't even know what my choices are." Like, I did not even know, like, what words to even be thinking, like sadness or happiness or engaged or
Wow.
nothing went. And so I'm not, I didn't live under a rock, I have been out and about. Um, but I found it fascinating that I didn't even know how to name emotions. So I'm going to guess that there are a lot of viewers out there who are in the same boat and they're judging themselves as, oh, I would never be able to do that. We all need to begin somewhere. And anyone who needs encouragement, get a hold of me. I'm very good at giving encouragement.
Well,
And
that's what I was going to ask you is, so obviously you work with people all the time. So how do people get a hold of you? How do you work with people? We have about 10 minutes left. So what do you do? How do you help people? Tell us how do we work with Canada's etiquette guy? Because I know you do more than teach etiquette.
Yeah, I don't teach as much etiquette now as I used to, although,
Right.
families do call and say, "Could you come over for dinner and teach us how to eat?" It's really honestly, it happens. I'm not making that up.
Well,
Um,
if the meal's good, yeah, I'll go, you know.
that's right. Sometimes I have to bring the cutlery, but, oh, it's okay, I'll bring it. Um, I have a little business called, Lemonade Mentoring. So
Right.
when life gives you lemons,
Make
make lemonade.
lemonade.
And, I have a Facebook page, and if you Google Jay Remer, you will find me. I'm very easy to find, and I'm very easy to get a hold of. I have a published telephone number and address and emails and all of that. And I do answer every, call and every question that comes in. And, people may write me. Some people will write and say, um and I've answered thousands of these questions. It's funny how you may think you're going to get questions on where do you put the fork. It's more like, what do I do with my mother-in-law? I get I get a lot of those, or there's lots of relationship problems that come up, and
Absolutely.
people don't know how to handle them because they don't want to. They don't want to. They've been injustice, like an injustice has been done to them, but they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Mhm.
So how do you do that? So those kinds of things come up, but really for people who are looking for a rebalancing, it is a time where you go through. So I would take someone. I do a 1 hour session, and we just deal with one pillar. And it's basically to deal with one pillar based on where are you suffering? What is your problem? What is it? Why have you come to me? What is the challenge in your life that you're having trouble with? So we can be quite specific to that. But you'll find that once you kind of open that box, that problem is really not the problem. There are more overriding things, and when you come to grips with that, you realize that that problem is really quite a manageable one, and so are a lot of other problems that you might have come up with. I do a wonderful mentoring program with the community college up here, where a business is matched with a mentor, and the business people, they've got, well, I need this, I need that, I need the other thing,
Mhm.
and by the time we're done, it's like, well, this isn't what I came for, but it certainly covered that and more.
Right.
So it is. I think these basic things, building a strong foundation for ourselves, is really, really helpful, and it alone relieves a lot of the suffering that we ourselves are experiencing. And once our own suffering is diminished, we can then begin to help other people. And that's really what we want. I mean, a lot of us want to do that. It's a natural human thing. We don't want other people to suffer. We certainly don't want to suffer ourselves. So, what I would suggest for people is go to the Lemonade mentoring Facebook page, and you can read a little bit about me. I also have an etiquetteguy.com website, and there's plenty of information about me and what makes me tick and where did I come from and why am I doing all of this kind of thing.
Okay.
And I have a number of podcasts that I've done that are based on articles that I've read in the newspaper, and I also produce two television shows that are up on YouTube through the Charlotte County Television
Mhm.
YouTube station. So I'm pretty easy to find, and I'm very willing to talk to people, either for 5 minutes, or you know to send me correspondence or whatever. And there's two things, Misha, sorry, that I don't like to get in my way. One is money, and the other is time. So time and money are two things that I don't generally put into the equation. So I charge $60 an hour, but for people who can't pay, it's not a gate. We can work through these gates. My job is to open gates, not to build them.
Okay.
So I think I'm easily approachable. And I think it takes a certain amount of courage for people to come to the point where, okay, let's give it a whirl. But once you can kind of get to that point, and there are more and more people who are finding, I really want to, like, what's going on here? I just can't live this way anymore. So I think it's this is one possible avenue where that they can certainly look into and see. Nothing resonates with everyone, but something resonates with everyone, and so that's what I kind of I want to be able to. You can't be all things to all people, but if you can find a place where, okay, I'm ready for this, I'm there.
I think that what you're doing is wonderful. I think it will resonate with many people. I think that it's I love. Let's go back to we have about 5 minutes, so let's go back to what you were telling me before the show because we talked just a few minutes before, and you had this review where someone basically said, "I didn't really learn anything I didn't already know," and
Well, what she actually said was, she said there wasn't anything in the book that we shouldn't already know,
right,
and that's true. There isn't. I'm not inventing anything. There's nothing to invent
right.
here. This is
And I
this is
think
all.
that's yes, and I think that's the best review you could get is because you're awakening people to what is innately in us and helping us rediscover um, the innate goodness that is in us. Because really, these pillars are about the goodness that's in us. I mean, we are. I think I see humanity as genuinely good, and as and so when we are aware and when we are showing compassion and being humble, showing humility and living in gratitude and being encouraging and taking responsibility, that is these are all things that we should know innately. And so I think the very fact that you are not, you didn't reinvent the wheel, you took who we are and you addressed that and you said, come on, I've got a little lemonade stand over here. We're going to just take who we are and we're going to talk about it and we're going to make the lemons that you think you have and we're going to make lemonade out of it. I think that there is nothing more profound than that because anything that you make more complicated than that, um, that's the stuff that we've busied life with, and that's got us in this predicament to begin with. And so I think what you've done is a beautiful thing.
Well, one of the nice things about the book, Mesha, if I can talk about it for just a second, is that
Absolutely.
it's divided into 6 chapters, each one being a pillar. And at the end of each chapter is a self-reflective exercises, and they're not they are as deep as you want them to be. They seem quite simple, but they're not so simple. And I think that the chapters are divided into short anecdotes, so you can, as one of my great mentors once said, she said, "This is a wonderful pick up, put down book." So it's not it's one that is short. You can read short anecdotes, and you can get inspired by, oh, that's an interesting one. It's one of those books where you pick up and just find a spot, and wherever
Yes.
you turn, there'll be something that'll be useful for you for that day. So I think that it'll be available on Kindle in probably by the end of November, and it's available on Amazon now. And if you want a signed copy, you get it directly from me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jay. I absolutely, it is, I read the part where you said it's a pick up, put down, but, and I loved that. And it's exactly how it is put together. It is one where you read and it's not, it's a comfortable reading book. It's one where you've got time. Definitely, you can definitely make time to read this book. You can sit down and you can read. It's like a page, a little over a page maybe, and you're like, oh wow, what a nugget that was.
Mm.
And then you can ruminate on that, and you can let that sit with you, and you can integrate that, and then when you've got another few minutes, then you can do the next one. And so I think it's very wonderful. Do you have any other last words?
No, I'll tell you, thank you ever so much for allowing me to come on. And if you ever have a discussion around civility or etiquette that you'd like me to be included in, just let me know. Because I think it's very important. And I think as more and more people begin to think about the world in which they are personally living. How much suffering are they doing? How much suffering am I doing? Do I want to continue this way, or do I want to figure out a way around it? And I think self reflection is the one silver lining that COVID-19 has provided us. And
Yeah.
I would strongly urge everyone to take advantage of it and to really focus on this. Not everyone's ready, but for those of us who are, I really think that the timing couldn't be better.
Yes, yes, absolutely. We've definitely, and your book is a wonderful place to start. It's a wonderful book. People are going to get very much from it if they will go on Kindle when it comes out and get it at Amazon now, and certainly go to the Facebook page. And we definitely want to have you back. Maybe we should get a small group together and just have that discussion. Maybe that's a show we should put together. We should look at that. That would be an awesome show to do. So thank you, Jay Remer, Canada's Etiquette Guy, for being with us. And it's the 6 Pillars of Civility is the book. But you're so much more than the book or Canada's Etiquette Guy. You are a wonderful human being from the heart that lives from the heart. And thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story with us and sharing your heart with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes. All right, you all, you know what I'm going to say, that it doesn't matter if it's the top of the hour, the bottom of the hour. It doesn't matter if it's a Monday, if it's a Tuesday. It can be any day. If you're looking at your life and you're like, I'm not so sure that this is how I want it to be. Well, then it doesn't have to be that way because it's your life, your story, and you get to write it your way. So just stop, take a deep breath, and start writing it a different way. And we just met a gentleman here who'd be happy to help you do that. And we have plenty of others who would like to as well. So it's your life, your story, write it your way. And as long as you're breathing, do it in great big capital letters. Keep living. Thanks for being here. Love you all so much. Make sure it's signing off. Bye.